Part 13. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 122. Not everyone is willing to suck blood in exchange for immortality and superpowers. Sierra pushed his shoulders and calmly left his embrace. I don't need any conditions you can give me. I am only willing to keep all your secrets in exchange for a chance to survive. Don't get so close to me in the future. Stay safe, Mr. Distance. Unnecessary. Rose Hill was stunned by her words and successfully made her leave him temporarily. But soon, Sierra walked to the door of the screening room. As soon as she opened the door and stepped out with one foot, a cold wind blew from behind and went straight to her neck. Her waist was hugged again, and her whole body moved in an indescribable way, retreating at a rapid speed. Her body hit the wall, and the strong arm behind her blocked the entire impact. She was not injured at all, but a lot of dust fell from the top of her head. She squinted her eyes and was about to sigh twice when an angry Rose Hill shouted at her, "No one can give you wealth, freedom, and everything you want like me. Even if you go and take your sister's twist your head off, I can help you deal with all the murders and arson in Lenny, but you actually told me that you don't want it." His ideas are filled with killing, money, and the so-called dark freedom, but lack of love. Sierra knew that Rose Hill was obviously attracted to her, but she had no idea that the behavior she was doing was linked to love, so who was stupid? How did he maintain his chastity in these centuries until now? Sierra simply responded to her request, "I want to be human. I like the warm body temperature, the aroma of food, and the blooming of taste buds." "So you still want to follow that stinky dog? He's staying in your yard, a nasty thing climbing on the wall." He became even more angry, and the arm behind her waist squeezed out a knuckle shape in the wall. Hole. Another new nickname. This ability of understanding is really hard to complain about. Sierra pursed her lips and simply stood up on tiptoes to cover her mouth that was crooked with anger. The furious vampire stood stiffly on the spot for an instant, and the softness that penetrated his lips was more effective than any means of comforting him. His anger retreated at the speed of light like a floodgate leaking water. He was like a defeated warrior who threw away his helmet and armor. He accepted his fate and hugged his fragrant enemy, and joined this new fierce pursuit without any hesitation. Aldine felt that a long time had passed, and planned to come over and take a look. As soon as he pushed the door of the screening room open a gap, he saw Sierra's two calves in the air, and she was being held in her owner's arms like a doll. "Kiss fiercely." He wanted to sigh, but he still endured the frustration silently and closed the door. The cells in the skull have long since died, but lust is the most evil thing that cannot be counteracted. No vampire can resist it, not even him, nor his master. I don't know if the head of the Lebanese brothel is picking up customers today. He really needs a woman to soothe his nerves after being shocked just 5 minutes away. Sierra's hands were wrapped around Rose Hill's lean waist under his coat, her fingertips dug into the corners of his suit, and her nails scratched his smooth marble back. Such suggestive movements made Rose Hill take a deep breath. A cool breeze suddenly hit Sierra's lips, and accidentally hit his teeth. When she got the chance to speak, she immediately whimpered and said, "You should go back and ask the vampires around you if they would do this to their followers." "Of course," he whispered against her lips, "they can have sex with anyone, as long as both parties have the same will. It's not love, just to vent your emotions. We have endless energy and we certainly need an outlet. You have never loved anyone, so who will solve the emotions you want to vent?" Every time she said a word, Sierra's lips would kiss him several times, without any extra gaps. "Don't compare my willpower with that group of low-level vampires," Rose Hill responded, dissatisfied. His eyes were very close, and the turbulence inside was not what he said. Sierra lowered her eyes and bit his lower lip. "Really? Then you go ask the vampires around you who have partners and then define your feelings for me. Are you a follower or a follower?" She raised her head and said softly and slowly, "Still love." Spouse. Distant words. Seeing that Rose Hill didn't speak, Sierra took her hand back from his clothes, climbed up to his chest, and pressed it on his heart that had stopped beating. When you understand, come to me and talk about it again. Rose Hill stared at her, the anger on his face had already collapsed, his lips were moist, and his eyes were filled with special emotions. He compromised. Because of the irresistible kiss, he understood that something was indeed wrong and that things were not as he proudly imagined. Sierra smiled and buried her face in his chest. Then we will make peace for the time being? You will take me home? I have to go to school tomorrow. That etiquette school, he said calmly and put her on the ground. Well, Dad and Mrs. Josie asked me to go. She leaned against his chest for a while, then raised her head and said, it's really unbelievable. I always thought that after revealing your secret, I would be dealt with. Come on, you said that witnesses only have two choices. You are different. He took her left hand and walked out, mockingly saying, my threats will not work on you. Sierra snickered. It was very late when she got home from the screening room. She had worked hard in class during the day and watched a midnight movie at night. She was sleeping soundly when Rose Hill took her out of the car, with a coat wrapped around her body to protect her from the wind. Mrs. Josie and Lizzie had already gone to bed, and only Annie and her servants were waiting at the door. She was wearing a solid color night dress, with a waist-cinching design and low-cut breasts that accentuated her figure. However, her breasts were not big, and no matter how low the neckline was, she couldn't reveal much of her beauty. Leave the person to me, Mr. Rose Hill, and I will take care of my sister, Annie said in a low voice, hiding the jealousy in her eyes well. Rose Hill walked around the servant's hand and said, where is the bedroom? Take me there. Anna 11 gritted her teeth and pretended to smile, okay. She turned around and walked up the spiral staircase, her long skirt pulled down to her calves, and she deliberately hunched her chest and back next to him, intending to release her charming charm. The sleeping Sierra groaned, and Rose Hill immediately lowered her head, her eyes resting on her mouth that chirped a few times. Probably dreaming about something delicious. Sierra also didn't expect Loseed to be so bold. As soon as she fell asleep with her eyes squinted in the car, she was pulled into the dream he weaved. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 123. In the cozy country villa, Sierra fell on the sofa, her lips were occupied by the ferocious mermaid, her hands were raised above her head without resistance and restrained by one hand, and she could only let out a shallow moan. I don't know what kind of strange noise this will make her in the real world. She fell asleep in the car, and Rose Hill sent her home without her. This is bad. Sierra didn't dare to say a word, for fear that she would call the wrong name again and someone who shouldn't hear it would hear her. Why are you so cooperative today? You didn't bite me, and you didn't resist me. Loseed left her red lips and licked her neck, which was raised in a small arc, feeling strange. Sierra shuddered and twisted her wrist to signal him to let go. Aren't you going to say anything, Sierra? Loseed raised his head, looked at her flirtatious look at the end of her eyes, and smiled. What are you playing with? Like a rag doll that I can play with. Sierra was already trying to glare at him to signal him to let go, but what if this was completely misunderstood? She raised her foot and kicked his leg, indicating that enough was enough. At the same time, as soon as Rose Hill covered her with a quilt, the soft goose down quilt was kicked open by her. Upon seeing this, the servant hurriedly stepped forward and said, Miss Sarah is not sleeping well, let me do it. No need. Rose Hill repositioned her legs, put the quilt back in a gentle manner, and covered her neck tightly. The servants who saw his caring actions did not dare to say anything. Loseed, who was rubbing his ears in his sleep, finally realized that Sierra was resisting. His smile faded slightly, and he grabbed her wrist and pulled her up. Who is sleeping next to you now? You don't want to talk to me? There was suspicion in his beautiful eyes, and finally a hint of jealousy emerged in them. After the mermaid became smart, she also learned to detect. Sierra was alert and her mind was racing. I sleep with my sister Anae. Logos yet thought of the discussions behind the teachers at school during the day. I thought your relationship was not good. We have a good relationship, Sierra replied without changing his face, and even took the initiative to hold his hand. At the same time, in reality, the sleeping girl whispered softly, and the hand that fell out of the quilt grabbed Rose Hill's palm. The man who was about to leave stopped. What did you say? He thought she had been awakened, so he bent down and got close to her face. Everyone, including the servant and Anasai, wanted to hear what Sierra said. The voice of Anna 11 was too soft, but several people heard whose name it was. The nominated Anna 11 thought she would scold herself in her dreams, so her eyes lit up and she hurried over. What did you say, Sierra? Sleep together. As soon as Anaxi squatted down by the bed, her expression froze. Her eyes were closed as if she wasn't awake at all, but he wanted to sleep with her? Rose Hill looked down at her and said strangely, you have a good relationship. He clearly remembered that Sierra was someone who would compete with his sister for her lover, so how could their relationship be good? Etc. Rose Hill frowned suddenly, and the word lover that he subconsciously thought of hammered into his heart, making his face covered with a layer of frost and snow. He compared himself to Sierra's lover, and expressed his thoughts so naturally without any objection. She didn't know why the people around her stopped talking. Just when Anaxi was about to bite the bullet and continue speaking, she heard Sierra on the bed say again, we have a good relationship. This bad girl didn't forget to impress the Duke even when she was sleeping, and she held his hand tightly. She was definitely pretending to be asleep on purpose. Anaxi held back her anger and put on a smile, we have a good relationship. I will sleep with her tonight. Mr. Rosehill, you can go home early. It is already late at night. She secretly drove away the guests, and Rosehill also knew that it was not appropriate to continue like this. He squeezed the soft little hand in his palm and slowly let go. Don't let her kick the quilt, she is so fragile that she often gets sick. The cold instructions made Anashi grit her teeth and said with a smile, okay, Mr. Rosehill, good night. She climbed onto Sierra's bed and lay next to her, watching the door being closed little by the servants, her heart and eyes full of the disgusting feeling of sleeping with a bad girl. The fireplace in the room was blocked by a partition. Anaxi tossed and turned for a long time and couldn't fall asleep. She simply sat up and looked at Sierra, who was always making strange noises with her lips, and a surprising idea suddenly appeared in her mind. Now people are around him without any defense. As long as Sierra is dead, as long as she is dead, no one can block his way forward. They would be hers in the end. Driven by this, Anaxi picked up the pillow she had slept on by accident, looked at the lace flowers embroidered on it, and looked at Sierra's peaceful sleeping face. She slowly covered her face with the pillow, her heart beating wildly as she did the bad thing. Sierra, who was still dreaming here, finally couldn't stand being taken advantage of by Logos yet unscrupulously. She had just told him a little lie with pen and paper. Anaxi slept next to her, and she didn't want the other person to know about their private conversations at night. A little secret that belongs to two people cannot be known to a third person because of dream whispers. Rockside accepted this exclusive setting, but he was also unscrupulous because she didn't want to talk. He had to do everything he couldn't do in his dreams during the day. Clean. Sierra was pressed against the wall and kissed by him for a long time. It wasn't until Logosied tried to put her hand deeper into the hem of her skirt that she finally woke up and kicked him. He actually wanted to take off her self-defense bell-bottom pants. A woman's scream sounded at the same time as the foot fell. Sierra subconsciously looked at Roxt, whose eyes were blurred and his mouth was half open. You. He quickly admitted his mistake and said, I won't do it next time. This is not a voice at all, who called it? Sierra asked doubtfully. No, did you hear a woman's voice? Seeing that she was not blaming him, Luosiet quickly raised the corners of his lips and said, "Oh, it was probably your sister who was kicked out of bed by you." Sierra's brain froze. It sounds a bit like her. No, how could Anaxi really sleep with her? Wasn't that a lie she made up? Could it be that he wanted to harm her? Realizing that there was a high possibility that Anna 11 could touch the room and kill someone in the middle of the night, she looked frightened and said, "Let me go back quickly. Let me see if she fell hard." Seeing her frightened expression, he was really frightened. Luosiet didn't waste any time and said, "See you tomorrow." He immediately dismissed the dream and returned her to reality. Sierra kicked her feet, suddenly opened her eyes and rolled out of bed. By the light of the fireplace behind the partition, she could clearly see Anaxi, who fell on the bedside, clutching her stomach. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the sure. Author, Mei Goicheng. Chapter 124. Hearing her whining repeatedly, Sierra didn't react for a moment. Just when she was about to ask what was going on, the bedroom door was pushed open by a servant who heard the noise. Seeing Anashi huddled on the ground with cold sweat on her forehead, and hearing her painful words, that Sierra suddenly got angry and kicked her out of bed. The servant, who thought she had kicked her to death, immediately went to wake up Lizzie and Josie. Sierra was still confused, but she also understood that she was injured because of her own kick. But it was originally a kick for Rockside. Because there was no pain in the dream, his kick was very hard. In fact, it was also very hard in reality. He almost fainted from the kick. In the darkness, lights lit up one after another in the large manor. Anaxi was injured and everyone was in chaos. Sierra finally learned the truth from the servant, who was no longer running around. It turned out that Rose Hill was around when she and Roxt made up the lie, and Anashi was also there. It turned out that both of them missed her words and thought she had called a sleeping companion service. But Sierra didn't understand why Anasi actually slept with her in the end. She could have finished lying and sneaked back to her room. There was no doubt that she had bad intentions. Mrs. Josie couldn't maintain her image as a lady because her daughter was kicked in the belly. She angrily scolded Sierra, "We feed you, house you, clothe you, and use you. My daughter is still with us, sleeping with you. Why do you bully her every day? Do you know how important a woman's uterus is? Sierra, you are going too far." Anaxi hid in her arms and cried softly, "Okay, Mom, I'm fine." "Don't defend her." Lizzie was also furious, holding up the crutch and swiping at Sierra's butt, but her legs and feet were agile and she could easily dodge. Faced with the family's rebuke, Sierra became selectively deaf. She turned around and took a sip of the warm water cup that the servant had just poured from the table. She said happily, "It's just a nightmare. Good night, my dear family, I hope you have a good sleep." Her so-called laid-back attitude made Xiao 11 angry and patted her chest. Compared to being discovered by Rose Hill that she was dreaming about Lockside again, Sierra thought that the current situation was pretty good. She locked the bedroom door and went back to bed to catch up on her sleep. No matter how she was slapped or shouted outside, she did not respond. She slept soundly until dawn. Anashi, who was kicked violently after trying to kill someone, was in so much pain that she couldn't sleep well all night. In the early morning, before Lizzie and others had gotten up, Sierra prepared to go out to school early to avoid unnecessary disputes last night, but Eric called home early in the morning. It turned out that after Gail told him her request, he helped her get the laundry business of the miners and railroad construction workers overnight. There was a lot of clothes to be delivered immediately this morning, and Sierra, as the owner of the laundry, needed to be on site. Go check it out. But this morning she had to go to class again and even changed into her school uniform. Sierra figured it out and took advantage of Joey to drive to the stable to fetch a horse and run away. When several servants noticed something was wrong, she had already ridden away without a trace. Regarding the fact that Sierra kicked Anashi out of bed last night, Josie also secretly instructed a purchasing maid to go out and spread the news. She couldn't bear the feeling that her daughter was kicked, and she was determined to destroy the slut's daughter. Not long after Sierra arrived at the butcher shop, Eric brought a horse over. The warm morning sun hit his resolute face, making him look handsome. The weather is starting to warm up, he rode alongside her. Summer is coming soon, Sierra said with a smile, it's time to play in the water, do you remember? Remember? His eyes fell on her wrist. Why are you still riding out? Is your hand feeling better? It doesn't hurt much anymore, Sierra winked at him. I've been attending etiquette school recently, so I skipped class today. Hearing the etiquette school, Eric lowered his voice and became a little angry. Master Lizzie shouldn't treat you like this. What etiquette do you want to learn? Sometimes he really should get a pair of glasses that can see the true face of things. Sierra smiled slightly. It's enough that you stand by my side, so there's nothing to worry about. To Eric, this sounded like I only need you. He said unnaturally, today I met Carol from the tailor shop. She said that you made many sets of clothes for the black slaves, and they even have pajamas, and you strongly requested to buy those furniture for them. To be honest, no nobleman can do what you do. I am able to do this because of you, Sierra said to the stunned Eric with a smile. I don't want to have boundaries with you because of my identity, so I treat black slaves the same way. No one is nobler than anyone else. Eric was lost in her smile, and the horse broke away from his control and leaned against the wall, almost rubbing him to the ground. He pulled the reins in time, his ears already red. I understand. Understand what? Eric looked at her, the shy smile unique to a young man gradually changed on his face, and the softness and tenacity of love burst out. You can let go of your identity and become an ordinary person because of me, and you can do your best to save a dowry, then the same. I also want to be rich. This time it was Sierra's turn to be stunned. Her horse ran very fast after arriving in the deserted suburbs. Eric always maintained a parallel distance from her with ease. She rode the wind and asked loudly, why do you want to become rich? I thought your tribe lived in the jungle and their thoughts were already ingrained. I don't know, and there has never been a girl who can make me think like this like you. Eric stared tenderly at her beautiful profile, where her hair was blown by the wind, and brushed her face, and said softly, you are a rose that bloomed in a greenhouse and was carefully cultivated. How can I drag you to an uninhabited mountain forest, go into the mud? What? Sierra asked loudly. He spoke too quietly, and the sound of wind and horse hooves could be heard in his ears, so he couldn't hear what he said. Eric smiled softly and replied loudly, because I want to take care of you after becoming capable. He wanted to raise her carefully. The flying hair covered Sierra's eyes, but it did not block the tenderness captured in the broken hair. The horse gradually slowed down, and Sierra was moved for a while, and was soon attracted by her own laundry factory. Several cars came to the door, with a wooden trailer hanging behind them, filled with mountains of clothes that needed to be washed. Many miners who were not alive today came to watch. Khalida also arrived early in the morning, and she had many tricks up her sleeve. Not only did she have a red carpet laid out at the door, but she also arranged several manual salutes and photographers, as well as an opening ribbon held by two people. Sela, you're finally here. I almost couldn't help but cut it off. Khalida waved to her happily. Vote, don't be lazy. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 125. I don't want to take pictures. Sierra jumped off the horse, threw the reins to Eric, and walked quickly towards her. Isn't Mr. Rosehill here? This also has his investment. Oh, I won't call him. He definitely won't go out during the day. Khalida rubbed her arms as soon as she mentioned this person. You really don't think he is scary? Have you seen the recent movie? Nosferatu? I think the fact that he is only ugly is inappropriate. In a gloomy castle, his pale face is just about to release the plague. Her sixth sense was really accurate, and Sira followed up by saying, your intuition is right, stay away from him in the future. Khalida laughed, thinking she caught her joke, and Eric, who led the horse aside, looked at Sira a few more times. I don't want to take pictures, just cut the opening ribbon. Sierra refused the photographer's request to take pictures of herself. When Khalida asked, she only said, keep a low profile, I don't want to reveal my identity so early. Why? Sierra smiled and said, keep it in mind, I want to do some charity work recently, and I will use the first pot of gold I earned today. Do you want to come with me? Are you going to imitate Madame Gigante in doing charity? No, I just want to do something good. Okay, but we still want to take a photo together as a souvenir. Instead of putting it in the newspaper, I will keep it at home. Okay. Sira smiled and cut the opening ribbon with Khalida. In the back, a dozen white-haired black slaves who were bought back were standing together in brand new work clothes. Since being arranged here, they have been washed cleanly and have enough food for 3 meals a day. All of them look exuding with healthy vitality. Sierra saw the little child worker she hired standing next to her mother, wringing her clothes with her little hands and looking at her with concern. Noticing the look in her eyes, the girl immediately shouted something excitedly to her. Knowing that she didn't understand, someone next to her translated, she said she would work well, thank you. Sira smiled and asked them all to stand beside her, and called Khalida again, I changed my mind. I will take a photo with my workers again. Crack. As the lights flashed, Sierra also thought of the title of the news. The laundry factory invested by Miss Khalida officially opened. Truck after truck of dirty clothes was transported into the factory, and all the laundry tools that Khalida equipped were also present. The workers, who had had enough to eat and drink in the morning, started their day's work after announcing the start of work. Before they were enslaved, most of them were housewives or workers outside the home. Washing clothes was a necessary skill and no one knew it. Even the only child worker was helping to pull the manual laundry bucket. The prices are even lower than outside and the offer of getting 2 free items for every 10 items washed. After a rough calculation, Sierra still made a profit. She asked Khalida to borrow a steward who could settle accounts and stay in the factory. She wrote down the price of the slave girls and the money spent on them one by one. She decided when they would pay off the money and started to make monthly settlements. Salary. You still want to pay them the minimum wage? You don't have to be so generous, Khalida said helplessly, buying them is the greatest gift. Just in case Sierra said the same thing. No one present could understand what purpose her operations had at present besides dispersing money. It was almost noon, and the 3 of them, including Eric, stayed at the factory to have lunch. The owner of the factory is here, and the cook invited today also made a little more beef and mutton soup. The meat was brought by Eric for free, and each slave during the lunch break could eat a big spoonful. Knowing that her right hand was not very convenient, Eric kept picking up food for her thoughtfully. While eating, Khalida watched the interaction between the two, doubts rolling in her heart, and she seemed to have noticed some big gossip. Her eyes were straight, staring at Sira slyly. It wasn't until Eric went to fetch the horse at the end of lunch that she found the opportunity to ask, what happened? Not only did you kiss the mermaid, you were intimate with Mr. Rosehill, and now you are also having an affair with a hunter in the tribe. Khalida should be the only person besides Anasai who has seen the truth. She is always on the front line. Sierra said with an upright face, I didn't. Really? That handsome bodybuilder just had to put a spoon into your mouth with his own hands. Khalida hooked her arm and humbly asked for advice. How did you do it? Tell me how. Sierra was silent for a while. This is not a good behavior. There is really no way. Okay, Khalida responded boringly, but I like your Little Mermaid better. I really hope you can bring another one from the sea for me to keep in the pond. Serato glanced at her twice, and then heard the shocking tangled words. I can also feed it with human flesh and give the owner of the corpse a large sum of money. She thought that the male protagonists were already perverted enough, but she didn't expect that the rich girl Khalida was also very perverted at heart. After finishing her work at the factory, Sierra saw that it was almost afternoon and decided to go to school again. Lizzie and the etiquette school teacher were probably going crazy now. Eric saw her off all the way, but when the two of them passed by Hawk Street, they noticed a lot of uncomfortable looks. Sierra's ears were not that good and she couldn't hear those whispers. The sleepiness in the afternoon and the rocking of the horse underneath her made her slowly yawn. Eric next to him gradually changed from a warm and approachable young man's face to one of deep anger. Did you accidentally kick and hurt Anaxi when you were sleeping last night? How do you know? Sierra reluctantly broke away from her sleepiness and said in confusion, I was not honest. As soon as I fell asleep and accidentally kicked her. I know you haven't been sleeping well. Eric turned his face and said, a servant in your manor is spreading rumors again. Do you want me to help you catch the bad guys? Sierra shook her head quickly. I know who is using such low-level tactics. Don't do anything and just let the situation ferment. Eric, I have a way. Oh well. The teenager who regretted that he could not help sent her to the door of the etiquette school and said, go home as soon as school is over and don't stay on the street. I know, you can go back. Sierra waved to him. Seeing her being led into the school by the teacher, Eric glanced at the huge office on the upper floor, and a figure flashed past. His resolute jawlines were tense, and he rode off to the recruiting station. He decided to join the army as the fastest way to gain status and money. Eric knew that this was not difficult for him at all. His body was strong enough to win everything he wanted. The only thing he had to deal with now was the opposition from his family. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 126. He believed he would work it out, and used Greenie's pregnancy as an excuse. You skipped class all morning. Miss Sarah, I thought you were a punctual and well-behaved child yesterday, but today I realized how wrong I was. You are so indifferent to school rules. Sierra was pushed into the coronation room by Bernice. As soon as her butt touched the black single sofa, her hands and feet were tied with ropes. Teacher Bernice, are you corporal punishment? She turned her feet, unable to move an inch. Bernice's eyes moved slightly, looking away from those beautiful milk-brown eyes. It was indeed corporal punishment. She didn't know what happened yesterday, but she sent 3 children who had been bullied by Sierra to the prison room. She also received a message from Mrs. Josie early this morning. The lady asked her to educate Sierra hard in school and train her to be a bad-tempered and unmarried loser. After that, she would gain enough money to live a prosperous life. I hope that when I open the door in the evening, I can get a sincere apology from you and tell me not to do this again next time. After gathering her thoughts, Bernice hung the key on her waist and stepped out of the door. The only light source in the room also disappeared little by little as the door closed, and in the end there was only a small amount of light coming through the crack in the door. Under normal circumstances, no girl could stay in there for more than an hour or two. They would cry and admit their mistake and beg Bernice for mercy and open the door. She was afraid that something might happen to the students and would usually guard the door. After sitting down on the chair at the door, Bernice decided that no matter how Sierra cried out later, she would have to stay in there for 3 hours before letting her out. The thought was wonderful, but the fact was that Sierra, who had been sleepy in the afternoon, Fell asleep within 10 minutes of leaning on the soft black sofa. Maybe other girls wouldn't be able to endure such a bad environment for a while, but for Sierra, this is simply the perfect time to sleep without being disturbed by the afternoon sun. How wonderful it is. I don't know how much time passed, but there was a vague sound of the thinking room opening and closing in my ears. Sierra opened her eyes half asleep, and couldn't see anything clearly in the dark room. It seemed like someone had come in, but it didn't seem like there was one. She was about to squint for a while, and her orange shampoo-scented hair quietly fell down to her face. In an instant, the girl on the sofa woke up with a start, but because her hands and feet were restrained, her eyes were dark and could not find the target and were out of focus. Lost-eyed. She couldn't see clearly and understood who could appear here silently. "You've been with someone else all morning." A gentle and beautiful voice sounded, followed by her ear being licked. "I'm not happy, Sierra. I was busy all morning at the laundry factory, nothing happened." Sierra tilted her head to one side and hid the licked ear. Logosied lifted the hem of her skirt and pushed it above her knees. "Is that so?" Sella suddenly felt goosebumps on her calves. "Don't mess around, Roxt. I told you not to do things that are not allowed. I'm just here to help you." He bent down in front of her and cut open the rope binding one of her legs with his nails. "I'll come back to you immediately after I finish taking care of what I'm doing. Don't lift my legs." Sierra's foot was easily caught and lifted by Logosied, exposing a long wound under her thigh. It was now a thick brown scab. Logosied's eyes softened. "I believe you, you are indeed back, and you still have the smell of being touched by many people." She said this, but in her hands she bent one of her legs and piled the wide skirt to one side. "Then what are you doing now?" Sierra started to get nervous, and Sleepyhead ran away because of his bold move. Within a few seconds, her nerves were tense and she felt a cool sensation on the wound on her thigh, as if someone was applying liquid wound medicine with her fingertips. She understood something immediately, and there was a bang in her head. She instantly imagined Roxid putting his knuckles into his mouth and bringing out saliva to treat her. Sierra's body was frozen and she didn't dare to move, and her face turned red. Logo 11 rubbed her leg slowly, scraping his nails across her skin that had become goosebumps, and chuckled with satisfaction. "Don't be nervous, these scabs will fall off soon. If you don't pinch me randomly, I won't be nervous." Sierra tried to move her hand and sighed helplessly. "This will be fine, it will really become his doll that cannot see the light." "I've always liked you like this," Logosied said softly. "It's like the way you can't walk and can only be in my arms after you have a fish tail." These words are a bit like the prison series novels she often wrote before. Sierra pursed her lips and educated him righteously. "Lost-eyed, you have just landed ashore not long ago, and your sense of right and wrong has not yet been formed. This kind of prison-style punishment is wrong." The mermaid didn't agree with her words at all. Under Sequoia Island is the largest underwater city in the world, a city thousands of feet below. The hollow caves built with stone walls store enough oxygen, and there are mountains of gold coins and jewelry. In the lightless room, the young man's whisper was like a chant, carrying some kind of weirdness and yearning. "Whenever the mating season comes, the sea water will be turned upside down by my tribe. I often hide in the uninhabited cave unbearably." Sierra had no idea why he was talking about this past event inexplicably, and the corners of her lips were glued to Luoxid again. His sticky breath lightly caressed her cheek, and the hand pinching her thigh moved to her right wrist, breaking the rope that tied her. "Do you know what I was thinking about at that time?" Sierra didn't dare to ask him what he was thinking, but just pursed his lips silently, feeling very panicked. Logosied was not disturbed by her silent attitude at all. He kissed the corner of her lips, took her right wrist and easily cut off the medical splint and threw it away. His slender arms, which were still growing bones, were carefully held to his chest. He said softly, "I once longed to spend the entire mating season as perfectly as them, but I couldn't be interested in any female mermaid until I met you. You always get me on some bad impulses. Roxid lowered his head, his personal monologue continued, and one moist kiss after another took advantage of the gap between sentences to fall on Sierra's injured wrist. Sierra immediately felt her bones healing at an extraordinary speed, accompanied by pain and itching. Out of patience, she bit her lip and said, "That's it, Luxid. Sometimes, I think you do it on purpose." Luoxiet kissed her again and raised her eyelids, her lake blue eyes shining like a lake in the darkness. "Do you know that mermaid story? I saw a brand new version in the library. Now that I think about it, it's different from the one you told me on the boat. Business ambitions belong to Rose Hill's domain, and Eric cannot compete with him in starting a business. He must shine in different fields to maintain a balance among the three. Therefore, I prefer him to become a powerful general." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 127. Sierra, who never cursed people without using curse words, spat out her words in her chest. At that time, she was bullying him because he couldn't understand all the words and was so unscrupulous. Of course, her original intention was to tell him not to fall in love with the three-legged Anaxi. At first, she really didn't think about using 3 boats to occupy everyone, but now all the problems left by these words have become her weapons to lose her horse at any time. Sarah, who has no protagonist's life, feels a headache. Lawside she can only continue to use her liar skills and get the deception right first. A story version can be derived from different stories by different writers. Just like the story of the princess with 3 boats that I told you, it is also different from the story that my sister and 11 told you. She turned over her hand and dug her fingernails into the palm of Luxid's palm. Do you remember the story she told you when you were still in the manor? Is that another version of the mermaid? He carefully recalled the scene at that time and found that it was indeed as Sierra said. The annoying girl also told him about another version of the mermaid. The doubts in his eyes were slightly dispelled, and his gentle voice showed a bit of relief. It turns out that the same story can be written by many people. Sarah's words are indeed not deceptive. Just like Danish fairy tales and Grimm's fairy tales are different, they both have mermaids, and the story versions are also completely different. After filling the hole, she didn't dare to relax easily. She only said in a soft voice, "Now that you have licked the wound, why don't you help me loosen it? Your corporal punishment time has not come yet. As your teacher, I cannot let go of you." Luoxiet leaned down slightly and put her right hand on the armrest again, apparently intending to tie her up again. This role was really perfect, but how could Cyril let him do this again? Her fingers casually grabbed a strand of his hair in the dark. "Then I want to change the method of corporal punishment." Luoxiet quickly turned his face, his lake blue eyes flashed with tiny light, and he seemed to be filled with expectation. "What kind of corporal punishment do you want? He doesn't look like a serious teacher at all." Sierra complained secretly in her heart, with a gentle and seductive look on her face. "Untie me now, I won't go home for dinner tonight. How about we go shopping together?" Luoxiet was startled. Shopping for groceries together? Sierra tugged down on his hair. She still didn't know how it grew. It was so thick that she couldn't pull out even one hair. "What do you eat at home? Do you go fishing in the sea every night? There is fresh fish available at the market." Luoxiet curled his lips and said, "So you want to come to my house and cook for me?" "Yes, isn't this considered corporal punishment?" "It requires physical labor," Sierra said with a smile, not feeling the slightest bit guilty about her rogue behavior. "Okay." Luoxiet loosened all the ropes that tied her, put his arm around her waist and lifted her up to stand up. "I'm going to the dance studio to play the piano in the afternoon. Let's go together after class." Sierra touched his face and sighed, "You still have professional ethics now, then I will go to class with you." When I came out of the dark reflection room, almost 3 hours had actually passed. Bernice, who was sitting against the wall, was still in a dazed state, her eyes were blank, and Rosside calmly put down a sentence, "It's time for Sierra to think about it." After finishing her words, the bewitched Bernice stood up like a puppet, patted the hem of her black skirt, and said to herself as she walked, "I hope Mrs. Josie will be happy with what I did today." I brought Sarah terrified. "Josie is your nominal adoptive mother, a vicious woman." Loosied led Sarah and walked slowly, "I know all her plots, such a person should be sent to the dining table." She trembled, "What did you say?" Lucid quickly changed his mind, "Send it to the police station." I can now ask Bernice to surrender to the police station and confess what the lady did. Oh no, a one-time blow can easily be solved by my father internally. I don't want that. Sarah refused him with a smile. This was the second time today that she refused help from the male protagonists. "Don't do anything, I'll take care of it." The dance studio in the afternoon needed Luziide to provide music because there were photographers and reporters from outside coming to take pictures and promote it. Sierra returned to the classroom without attracting any attention. Only Lena, who was almost fed to mice by her last time, cast a frightened look at her. In the dressing room, everyone was changing into dresses and dancing shoes that they would wear later. Her clothes and shoes were given to her by a student. Wearing a brand new pink slim-fitting dress with a short skirt around the hips, Sierra checked it carefully from top to bottom, made sure it was fine, and then focused on the shoes. She changed into her skirt like everyone else around her, casually picked up her shoes and shook them off, then looked inside to make sure there was nothing unusual before stepping in with her feet. As soon as Sierra stood up, the stinging pain on the soles of her feet made her freeze in vain, and she fell back onto the bench. There was a stinging pain in the soles of her feet. Sierra raised her feet and took off her shoes expressionlessly, with a cold curl of her lips. Some unscrupulous person stuck the broken short needle into the soft insole and sewed it up. No wonder she couldn't see it. When she stepped on it, a small bloody hole was poked in the sole of her foot. It wasn't serious, but she was really angry. 3 things happened, and this was already the second time. She glanced at the group of students who were still in the locker room, including the one who brought her clothes, and then walked over and closed the door of the locker room without saying a word. Some blood stained from the socks and rubbed onto the floor. Several conscientious students worried, "Miss Sarah, you are injured." Sierra locked the door, lifted the wooden stool that had been dragged to her side, and threw it to the ground. The loud noise attracted everyone's exclamation and attention. Sierra picked up a thick stool leg and bumped it in her hand, and said to them with a smile, "Excuse me, it was too noisy just now. Now I want to say a few words." The atmosphere was quiet except for the sound of breathing. She said with satisfaction, "I sincerely came here to go to school and make friends, but on the first day someone put a dead mouse on my bed, and on the second day someone stuffed a short needle into my insole. Now I just want to know, which students will cooperate with teacher Bernice to harm me again?" As soon as they heard her accurately naming Bernice as the mastermind, several girls instantly looked panicked. Someone was the first to say, "Whoever hurt you was because you were careless." Sarah would continue to maintain a ladylike attitude, holding a stick in her hand, and said gently, "I skipped class this morning because teacher Bernice was suspected of committing crimes and accepting bribes, so I went to the police station to make a record. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the shure." Author, Mei Cheng. Chapter 128. You don't have to stand up and point out who is helping her behind the scenes. The police will come to interrogate you tomorrow. All the girls suspected of covering up here will go to jail to accept my prosecution. Then everyone will spend the rest of their lives. Sierra's voice paused and she smiled brightly, Don't even think about getting married again. There was a wave in the crowd instantly. No girl dared to joke about her lifelong event. There were more than a dozen people. The bold ones kept tight-lipped, while the timid ones jumped out quickly. The blonde girl whom I met last time in the attic dormitory timidly raised her hand and pointed at the two girls with worried faces. Bernice called Lena and Irene, they have nothing to do with us. Today I'm only investigating who put the needle in the shoe. Sierra shook her head and raised a finger, that's the one person. The girl who brought the clothes was afraid that she would be implicated, so she bit her lip and said, when I was helping you pick up your clothes, I saw Irene mending your shoes. I wonder if that's the reason. It's me, so what, I'm just mending your shoes out of kindness, Eileen said sternly. What to mend for new shoes? Sierra held the wooden stick and walked towards her calmly, and everyone consciously gave way to her. The girl named Irene was very tall, a head taller than Sierra, and naturally looked bigger than her. She was not afraid of her aura at all, nor did she believe that she really dared to hit her here. It's a pity that Sierra can't do anything. She smiled and used the wooden stick with nails embedded in her hand to hit Irene's resisting arm hard. Ah! The huge scream almost broke through the roof. Reporters and photographers in the dance room were already waiting inside. Several people took a few photos of Rox sitting behind the piano and exclaimed, if you become a star, if you go, you will definitely become famous. Hearing the noise coming from above, everyone, including the teachers, looked up. Bernice immediately wanted to check out the situation. Lucid touched the keys with his fingertips and said, nothing is more important than enjoying my piano music. Everyone's eyes averted and they all gathered around his piano. The perfect music of Wanderer's Fantasia also penetrated the partitions and reached the top of the building. Sierra rode Aaron and listened to the sometimes passionate piano music below, and the beating was effortless. Not only did she draw Irene's hands until they were dripping with blood, she also put her hands on her neck and threatened, I thought the fact that I fed Lena rats yesterday was enough to make you restrain yourself. Miss Eileen, what does your family do? That gives you the courage to bully a noble like me. Sierra held her neck tightly, and the other party couldn't say a word and could only beg for mercy with her eyes. When Lena told her that Miss Sarah was particularly scary, she didn't take it seriously. Now she really regrets it. She shouldn't have obeyed teacher Bernice's words and left injuries on her arms. No matter how ferocious the movements of her hands were, Sierra looked at the girls huddled together with a friendly smile on her face. In the eyes of everyone, her contrasting appearance was very strange. They looked like they were scared out of their wits about her. Sierra didn't really make a killing blow until he got to the back. At most, he could make the opponent's skin break a little and bleed a little more. When the bullied Aaron cried, she slowly stood up and threw away the stick, raised her chin and said to the people in front of her, you can publicize today that I hit someone, and I will publish the experience I received here in the newspaper. You want me to be ruined? I also have ways to bankrupt your family. I can only go back and be a pathetic person, a tutor who lives under someone else's roof. Believe me, this is definitely not a joke on my arrogance, Sierra said with great momentum. I am the daughter of an Orthodox Earl, a close friend of the Duke of Rosehill, and a partner of the daughter of the Bank of England. I have countless ways to find out. Let us know your respective family backgrounds and visit them one by one. The first person to bow to her was the blonde-haired girl despite the obvious threat. She already felt that they were at fault for this matter, so she raised her skirt and knelt down to apologize to her. It's wrong to bully schoolmates. A lady would never do that. I'm sorry for keeping silent before, and hope for your forgiveness. The vast majority of girls like her did not participate and only watched, and one after another, everyone apologized to her. Another unknown girl said in a low voice, I also think we are not good at this. I once saw Miss Sarah at the dock saving a slave child from being whipped and giving her food. This matter has been in my heart for a long time. I also hope that everyone can be more peaceful. Teacher Bernice must have been instructed by others to target Miss Sarah. We should not get involved anymore. This power has been established, and the next step is to give a candy. Sierra softened her attitude, pulled up Irene, who was frightened by her, on the ground, and smoothed her hair. You caused a hole in the sole of my foot, and I also caused you to be injured. From now on, you will treat it as nothing. How about we even out this matter? She stretched out her hand to Irene, and there were a few red marks on the white palm from holding the stick. Irene cried and shook her hand tremblingly. In the end, neither of them went to the filming downstairs. They only asked their classmates to go downstairs and call the teacher, who was addicted to music, to call a doctor to treat the wound. When the teacher asked what happened, no one told the truth because of Sarah's previous warning. Only she said that she broke the stool and hurt Irene. This matter was barely passed over. When school was over in the evening, Sarah, whose solace were no longer in the way, stood at the door of the dance studio. She changed back into her previous regular school uniform and watched Lucide walk out of it, accompanied by Bernice's attentive invitation. "Would you like to have dinner together? Teacher Lucide. I have a special lecture." Lucide paused slightly and turned around. He leaned over and said something in her ear. While the other party was stunned, he came to Sarah and stretched out his hand to her. "My feet are still there, okay?" There were so many people and so many eyes. Sarah took a step back and shook her head. "It's a small injury, it doesn't affect walking. Let's go shopping for groceries." "Don't buy it, someone will deliver it to your home soon." Lucide walked to her side, walking very slowly, always paying attention to her steps. Sierra glanced at the dance studio that was gradually going away, and said suspiciously, "You won't be so bad as to ask Teacher Bernice to buy groceries for us, right?" Lucide smiled slightly and quickly hid the danger flashing in his eyes. "Of course not." What came to pick them up was a black classic car, which looked similar to the one in Rose Hill. It was a brand name car of the same brand. There was also a driver in the car, and Sierra was a little surprised when she got into the back seat and saw his appearance clearly. Because he is also very good looking, and like Roxt, he has the ultimate beauty that is different from normal creatures. This is definitely not a derogatory meaning, but a real compliment. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Guicheng. Chapter 129. This is Zachary. As soon as he got into the car, Lucide squeezed beside her and wanted to lift her feet to see the wound. As soon as Sarah saw this posture, she understood that the mermaid leader of Lucide had a distinguished status. If he used saliva to heal her injuries in front of her subordinates, it would be a shame. Thinking of that terrible scene, she immediately pressed his arm and hugged it to her chest, and cheerfully said hello to the mermaid in front, who also had legs. "Hello, Zachary." Due to the leader of his own tribe, Zachary responded kindly, "Hello. Isn't it too cruel of you to bring a mermaid with a split leg to land?" Sarah tugged on Roxide's clothes and whispered in his ear. "I didn't force any mermaid to come with me," he explained aloud. "I only came ashore for one purpose." His eyes were too focused on her face, and Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She felt that the little seed of love was about to break through the ground. She quickly drove his charming handsome face out of sight, turned her face away and whispered, "Okay, I know what your purpose is, it's too obvious." Lucide chuckled happily and kissed her fair side cheek. "Speaking of which, I haven't fully shown you my legs yet." Sarah glanced at the man who had legs with hers and had a lot of her legs, and didn't understand what he meant. Everyone in the etiquette school was almost gone, and a man in a wide windbreaker carrying a large push of paper bags of food slowly walked in. Bernice, who had just returned to the dormitory and felt restless, soon heard a steady knock on the door of her room. "Which teacher hasn't gone home yet?" No one responded outside, and Bernice's back felt cold, because just now, Teacher Lucide, whom she fell in love with at first sight, viciously cursed her to die today. The fear coming from a woman's sixth sense made her stay away from the door and took a pair of small scissors from the bedside table. The seven-shaped door handle with an inner buckle rotates under the action of external force, creaking. Wind leaked in through the crack in the door, and a man holding a paper bag walked in. He raised his pointed chin, revealing his strange blue eyes. Bernice's eyes widened in vain. Bang! In the empty school, there was a loud noise of heavy objects falling, frightening the wild cats passing by the wall in the backyard. Loosied's home is in a single-family house on the street, but it is much more deserted than Hawk Street, which is further away. Many wealthy people's houses are listed for sale, and not many people can afford the high prices. Zachary did not enter the house, he just drove the car to the door, dropped the people off and left. Sierra looked at the living room covered with floral wallpaper from the door. It was clean and tidy, with no smell of strangers. Loosied walked to the kitchen. "I'm going to make tea." "Can you?" She followed and walked in. The kitchen is bright and clean, the sink is dry, and the kitchen counter shows no signs of use. The shelves are filled with all kinds of pottery, except for the tea table where the water is boiled. There are some tea industry debris. I've learned it several times. I like the tea and coffee here. Loosied opened the firewood opening of the wood stove, lit a match and threw some combustion aid into the small opening. He looked calm and skillful. Sierra's eyes were focused on the outdated wood stove, and she realized that she had overlooked something very important. In reality, she can only use natural gas, and the Sela who lives in this world is a young lady who has no love for sex, and they all have one thing in common. I want to mess it up, but the 2 rounds of paid park will be launched today. Alas, there is still one more chapter to write. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Cheng. Chapter 130. In reality, she can only use natural gas, and the Sierra who lives in this world is a young lady who has no problem with sex. They all have one thing in common. She doesn't know how to use the kitchen or control the heat. To round things off, today's dinner will be ruined if she is left to cook it all. I called your manner today. Sierra replied disapprovingly, so? What did you say? Loosied took out a clean tea set and put it on the tray, tilted his head and raised a smile. I recommend myself to your father to become your weekend music teacher. The steaming water rushed into the teacup, and the mist fluttered on that evilly beautiful face, revealing a bit of meaning. This way we can stay together even on the weekends. Sierra's heart was rejecting, very much so. She reached out and hugged his waist from the side, and said with a smile, "We will meet from Monday to Saturday, and now you don't even miss the weekend." Loosied lowered his eyes and softened his voice, "Don't you hope?" "I hope, of course I hope, then tomorrow is the weekend. Will you come?" "Come." Loosied put the mellow black teacup into her hand and opened the door. A man in a windbreaker followed him into the kitchen and put down the large piles of fruits and vegetables he had bought. Like rocks, his eyes are blue, like a mottled sapphire, but it doesn't affect the viewing quality. This is also the same kind. It's been taken care of. He glanced at Sierra, nodded to Loosied, and turned away neatly. Compared with the way Sierra met Roxt when he came ashore for the first time, she found that the 2 mermaids had no sense of unfamiliarity with the land at all, and only had eyes full of vigilance towards her. It was strange, but the fact was that both mermaids were giving her this look. Why should we be wary of her? Loosied blocked her gaze at the door and asked, "What do you want to do tonight?" Sierra glanced at the things piled on the kitchen table. "Let's make soup and spaghetti with meat sauce. You just have to help me control the stove. I'm not very good at it." The person next to me smiled softly, "Okay." Outside the small kitchen, which is full of warm lights. The clean chimney on the roof is smoking for the first time. With her hands dipped in bacon sauce, the girl asked the silver-haired young man cutting carrots to wear an apron for her. "I forgot. I'll get it on my skirt later. Come and help." Rawside was facing her and pulling the apron off her head. Sierra pressed her face against the woolen vest on his chest, feeling the hand go around her arm and reach the thin rope behind her waist. It's obviously just a simple action, but it's designed to be a clinging hug. "Are you coming home tonight?" He buried his head in her neck and rubbed her neck before letting her go and letting her continue cooking. "Of course I have to go home. I said girls can't stay outside." Sierra cooked the meat sauce and poured some on the noodles, and then mixed a vegetable salad. She picked up a piece of avocado and stuffed it into her mouth, then picked up a piece of lettuce and handed it to him. "Try it." "Did you add too much tarragon vinegar and oil?" Under the light, the handsome young man held her wrist and lowered his head. He took the lettuce slices with his teeth and ate them. His pink tongue poked out and carefully licked the remaining sauce on her fingertips. Lacid Sierra took a breath. "Your hands taste the best." He was still not satisfied, and he didn't forget to take her hand and rinse it in the sink afterwards. "Okay, let's eat." After dressing up as the evil girl in the second game, I opened my eyes and found myself in the Sure. Author, Mei Cheng. Chapter 131. A cozy three-story house, a candlelight dinner for two, and the soft soundtrack of the record player. Door. Two mermaids squatted silently in the corner, holding the fried fish lunch boxes they had just bought on the street. They looked so stable in front of others, but how miserable they were when they couldn't enter the house. They could only eat dinner by the light leaking from the kitchen. Luozide washed the dishes in the end and took her to the bedroom after that. Seeing him standing in front of the bed and preparing to unzip his trousers, Sierra suddenly held down his hand and said with a blush, "What are you doing? I don't have this type of physical work." "Let me show you my legs." He smiled innocently on his innocent face. "Don't you like it?" It turned out that it was not his legs that were wearing trousers, but his legs that wanted her to see him naked and taking off his trousers. Sierra finally reacted and held his hand tightly without letting go. "No, it looks good this way." "Really?" Luozide frowned slightly. "I thought you had been looking forward to the scene for a long time." "Is she the kind of naughty girl who has a fetish for looking at legs? Why do you say it so strangely? I never expected you to grow legs." Sierra let go of her hand and dug her fingertips up into his wool vest, touching his strong abdomen bit by bit through the thin layer of shirt. The mermaid in front of her trembled in excitement, put her hand on her shoulder, and trembled her eyelashes. "Sierra." The girl's slender fingers slowly circled around her abdomen and touched his waist. When she heard that the breathing of the person in front of her became extremely heavy, her hand stopped when it reached his chest. The body under the shirt trembled slightly, and the woolen vest was tightly wrapped around the little hand, pressing him down. The young man in the dark bedroom bit his lip and breathed unsteadily. "What do you want to express?" Sierra raised her face and said with a smile, "How come you only have good legs in my eyes? I like the place I just touched and what I see now." What she saw in her eyes. Luxid lowered his head, held her whole body in his arms and pressed her down on the soft bed. He squeezed her waist with his hands happily, rubbed his head against her neck, and sucked out another stroke with his lips on the side of her neck. Traces of one. "I am very happy." He looked no different from a large pet acting coquettishly, and Sierra held his head and couldn't help but laugh. She didn't stay at Luox's place that night, so she returned to the manor a little late, almost 9 o'clock in the evening. Lizzie heard that she was back in the library, but she didn't even bother to tell her a lesson, and she wasn't even in the mood to go out to meet her. She only asked the servant to give her a warning. Next time she comes back so late, he will consider sending her back to Leicestershire. This pale threat was of no use at all. Sierra nodded confusedly, and the servant who received the call from the etiquette school hurriedly came to her. "The school just called. Your teacher Bernice passed away. The school informed you that you will have a week off and will go back to class next week. Sierra paused as she stepped onto the stairs. How did you die? When did it happen? This evening, I heard that he committed suicide by jumping off the building and hitting the fountain in the backyard. He broke his waist and drowned. This evening. This evening, Lucid was always by her side. A certain scene flashed through her mind, and Sierra narrowed her eyes slightly. The mermaid, who said she would not help, probably sent someone to kill the teacher secretly. Sierra went back to her room without saying anything. Early in the morning, Eric took the bag of gold coins assigned to Sierra by Robinson. It had been a long time since he opened the business, and he wanted to give her part of the investment income that belonged to Sierra. Eric, you insist on responding to the conscription. I don't care about you, Robinson warned before he left. You must know that once your identity is exposed, I will let the tribe clean up you and those people, and I will never treat you because of it's my son who's partially covering up this. Eric got on his horse and nodded to his old father in the wheelchair. A music teacher was coming to class today, and Anaxi and Sierra were sitting in the living room early to wait. I don't understand why Dad hired a random teacher on the phone to teach, she complained to her mother, Josie, dissatisfied. Maybe my musical attainments have already surpassed his. Thinking of the noise she heard in the rose garden that night, Sierra smiled mockingly. Chiao 11, who is still somewhat self-aware about her daughter, also said, I am from the capital, and today I was in the morning newspaper for my piano skills. I can definitely teach you. What newspaper? Anna 11 didn't pay much attention to the new news recently. Only Josie glanced at Sierra thoughtfully. The classic car belonging to Logosied stopped at the door. As the door opened and closed, a few minutes later, he was ushered in by the blushing servant. Anaxi was shocked when she saw him standing up suddenly. The look of shock on her face was no exaggeration at all. The servant said, It's the piano teacher invited by the master, Mr. Lucid. Carrying a briefcase and wearing an off-white suit, the young man raised his lips and politely greeted the three ladies in the living room. When he walked up to Sierra, the smile on his face deepened. She also introduced to Anaxi and Chiao Chi on the side with the same familiarity, This is also my teacher at etiquette school, Logoside. Josie smiled and agreed, I saw it in the newspaper. About a piano teacher who promotes etiquette school and becomes unexpectedly popular. Anna 11's nervousness had just passed, followed by a heart attack and a brain that was about to be unable to turn around. She and her mother were planning to take Sierra out to school, hoping to train her to be bad. What happened now? Because Lucid was far away from Cambania County before, and she didn't know when he would come back, Anai didn't waste the number of daily checks on him. However, just such a small oversight, the other party has already we have a teacher-student relationship with Sierra. How long has it been? Why have there been such earth-shaking changes? Could it be that she personally pushed the mermaid to Sierra? The more she thought about it, the more suffocated Anaxi clutched her chest and said with difficulty, So you are here to teach the two of us today? Yes, Logosied nodded. That's fine, then she still has a chance to make amends. Under Anaxi's guidance, the three of them went to the piano room together. Since she was the only daughter in the manor, there was no spare piano for Sierra to use. When Lizzie gave Lucid the job, she didn't even consider that she had a daughter who needed a piano. Even Anna 11's own embarrassing situation appeared. When she sat in front of her piano familiarly and greeted the handsome teacher, Sierra stood alone by the door with her eyes half lowered, looking like being deliberately excluded again.